I'll call the meeting to order.
The meeting has been posted according to open meeting laws.
Roll call.
President Seeger.
Here.
Trustee Alexander.
Here.
Trustee Nugent. Trustee Johnson. Trustee Renucci.
Here.
And Trustee Smalley is not. Okay, and Trustee Wisniewski.
Here.
Thank you.
Just a reminder again, please everybody use microphones when communicating for the televising of the meeting. Village resolution for citizen participation. Anyone wishing to address the village board during citizen participation will be allowed 5 minutes. Your subject can be anything whether on the agenda or not. The village board should not engage in a discussion regarding comments because it was not part of a publicly noticed agenda. Upon conclusion of the citizen participation, members of the audience are not allowed further comment unless they are participating in a public hearing or specifically allowed by a majority vote of the village board due to involvement in the agenda item. That being said, would anybody like to speak during citizen participation? Hi. How are you? Good, Mary. How are you doing?
Press the button, Mary. Mary Nickerson, 2916 North Street. I'm going to talk to you a little bit tonight about the Tri-Troy Alliance. That's something that's very near and dear to my heart. And with our little change, of administration coming up, I want to make sure that there's an understanding of what it really is. It's a communication tool. And what happened is that in years gone by, there was a lot of controversy between the municipalities, and it resulted in a lot of legal expenses. I don't want to pay you. And with that being said, this Tri-Troy Alliance does improve the communications between the municipalities, and I want to make sure that that is heard and absorbed by this board, because it was a pretty dark time when there was perpetual lawsuits. And the only people that won were people like you, sir. And that's why I want to make sure that you continue this little organization. And I know it's a pain, it's another night meeting, but it is very, very important that the municipal boards know one another and know how to work together. That's all.
Thank you, Mary. And just to let you know, Mary, Matt will be at that meeting tomorrow.
I will see you tomorrow night.
Would anybody else like to speak during citizen participation? Would anybody else like to speak during citizen participation? If no, then I'll close citizen participation and move on to consent agenda. One motion and a second will approve all of the following items. Any item may be pulled from the list and voted on separately.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to miscellaneous business. Consideration of cyber insurance coverage for February 1, 2023 through January 31, 2024. Any questions?
What does this cover? I'm just curious. Just for our computer backups and that kind of stuff?
If somebody were to, basically, if somebody does something malicious in our computer system, so if we,
Ransomware?
yes, we
Okay.
get hacked.
Yeah, it's listed right here. General cyber restoration.
I forgot my
You
magnifying
got that
glass.
printed
I'm
out?
I'll make a motion to approve the league's recommended cybersecurity coverage with Tico Marine for the policy period of 2/1/23 to 1/31/24.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Empowerment update. Any questions about the updates that we have?
Yes. Page 2, I had, I guess, they were talking about the groundwater, the flow of the groundwater. And on page 2 of 5, I'm reading part of it, the theory, but I know that the lot across the street from the old Trent Tube plant was their parking lot. That's where Brolin Park is right now. That was Trent's parking lot. There was a house there originally, right, Mary? And they tore it down, they made it a parking lot. But the groundwater around the area, like from where the landfill was outside on the other side of the freeway, the groundwater flows east by northeast. That's one reason why we didn't put well 7 in the industrial park, because of the flow of the groundwater that was coming from the general vicinity of the landfill. And it's the same out at the airport. It's flowing east by northeast at the airport. So I just want to make sure that we know that the groundwater isn't flowing west, it's going east by northeast. And let me see. Get one. And I also wanted to know about the, when the sampling is completed, are we paying for that, or are we, I mean, how does that get worked out?
So the sampling is part of the proposal. What's not part of the proposal is to abandon these wells, because we don't know when that's gonna happen yet. So that would be a separate proposal. And additional sampling would also be, you know, that's outside of this proposal.
But they didn't think to give us a cost of what it might cost to abandon a well, even when the time comes?
The problem is we don't know when that would be.
But eventually it would have to be abandoned, right?
That is correct. And it does talk about it in there, but we don't know when that is. So because we don't know when it is, we don't know how much it's gonna be. We know, we would know what it could be today, but it's not likely to be soon.
So we're just kind of at their mercy then?
It doesn't say we have to use them to abandon it. We just need to use a well installer to abandon it. We don't necessarily have to use Endpoint to abandon them. So no, we're not at their mercy. As far as the water travel, we really don't know what's going on, and I will admit this is somewhat of a educated guess, but the thinking here is, on the old Trent site, there is a well in the northwest corner that has an elevated pH level, much like we're seeing in some of the sampling we did. And the thought is that that water is traveling underground along the sanitary line. There's a sanitary line that goes from the Trent property out to Church Street, and then there's another one that goes from Church Street over to North Shore Drive. So the thought is that the groundwater could be getting in that conduit, if you will, and getting, you know, going west through that.
Will Endpoint or us be notified? I know this is in the right-of-way, but notify these property owners?
So I figured I would reach out to each adjacent property owner and let them know what's going on. And we will also have to apply for one permit because it's in county right away. One of the wells on Church Street is actually county right away, so we'll have to apply for the permit as well.
The other ones are in our right of way?
Correct. The other 3 are on North Shore Drive and Division Street right away.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the proposal from Endpoint Solutions for $20,500.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Consider TID 4 change order and final pay request. Tim?
Back up here. So, as part of the project, which was completed mostly last year, we've been waiting for a while to get some final numbers as far as common excavation number from the contractor. Finally went back and got that from them. We're able to work with the cost a bit because we were able to get some savings with MP systems going in. But the final cost did come out slightly higher than we had talked about I think last July. The last July memo was the last time we had brought this to the board. So does come to a contract change of $338,000. Now that's for that additional southern grading that we did, some changes to the stormwater pond to get basically the site ready for MP systems, as well as another adjacent site. So that's where that came out to. As part of that, Jason noted there's a couple of manholes that are currently, they're settling around the manholes. The manholes aren't moving themselves, but the adjacent pavement is settling around for the manholes out there. We were able to, even with it being almost 2 years later, we're able to get them to guarantee and warranty that work. So they will be coming back in spring to make those repairs. And this would reflect all final costs. So it's a final pay application as well as a change order we're bringing for your consideration.
Does this amount, is this reflected in the cash flows that we have for the TID?
The change order is not reflected in the cash flows that you have, but all the expenditures up to date through 2022 are.
It's essentially a pay application of approximately $100,000, of which about half of that was retainage.
Tim,
So- No, go ahead.
Tim, I had a question in regards to reading the second paragraph here, and it was talking upon additional review and negotiations, it was determined that the topsoil depth used in the village as-built computations was low. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So common excavation, as I've talked about before, is always a number that contractors and engineers and nobody ever really agrees on these numbers. It's always a challenge. In this case, when we did our calculations that came up with the 325, as far as 325,000 cubic yards, we used 4 inches of topsoil because that's what we put back. In some cases where they had to remove, in reality, there's 11 inches of topsoil, so there was some additional cut or removal they had to do to grade the site out.
Did we do any soil testing out there to figure out how much topsoil we were gonna be pulling out for your estimates?
Yes, we had soil borings on the depths, so that was what was confirmed with those.
Again, I just don't understand why did we figure 4 if there was 8 or 10?
Because 4 is going back. That's what was put back. In the initial calculations, it did not reflect that, though.
Sorry, I'll go back to my question then. So we've already, of that 338, we've already paid 238. Is that right?
Correct, but really, and half of that's retainage.
Half of the draw requested or half that we paid?
Half of the draw requested is retainage. Ford, I need your glasses to read this, but I'm kidding. Should have brought my iPad. Yeah, so I mean, the current payment due is $100,098. I don't have the previous on here, but I believe the retainage is about $50,000.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the change order and final pay request.
Any other discussion?
I was just gonna ask about when your thoughts were, when we were just gonna say amicably, thank you, goodbye, and we're done.
That is exactly what we'll be doing with this, except we do have a letter saying that they're gonna come back and repair those manholes. So in spring, they're gonna come back and take care of those.
So the larger rocks have been installed out there in the riffles?
That's the dam.
no,
This is
this is
the TID4, this is the business park.
Business park.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Tim. Consider water system evaluation proposal. And I believe we've got Ben Wood here to discuss that. Is that right?
We do. It's been a while. It's been a while since Ben has been here. Ben's with Strand. Strand is the consultant firm we use for the water utility, and it's time for us to do a water system evaluation update. And Ben's going to give us an overview of what we're proposing here.
Thank you. All right, as Jason said, thanks for having me. I believe the last time I was here was when we were talking about the modeling that preceded the Downtown Square project. What is going on with the water utility is a culmination of three different major factors that are really converging to make now the prudent time to do a system-wide study of the system and come up with a kind of coordinated long-term capital improvement plan for the water utility. So those three factors are, you've got growth. Growth we looked at and just took a small look at a couple years ago with Jason for making sure that we understood what the system's capable of providing to support growth, particularly south of the freeway. But I know that growth overall is a factor, and you obviously want to continue to grow to support low rates and increase revenues, et cetera. We have aging infrastructure. So one thing that Jason ran into last year was the generator at well 8 was failing. As we took a look at that, it turned out there's some non-typical power supply issues, and that project kind of was looking like it was going to turn into a hairball. So we pressed pause on moving forward to do anything with that. And then, of course, everyone's familiar with PFAS. So the water quality issue and PFAS in particular really presents an opportunity and a need, I would say, to look at all of these different influences, overlay them, so that we can identify like what are the short-term, mid-term, and long-term needs for the water utility and put reasonable budget costs to each of those. So coming out of this, we'll take a look at updated growth projections, equate that with the demand. We'll review on-site with a water supply engineer, either a structural engineer or architects, and an electrical engineer, each of the facilities, and we'll do a condition review to identify, approximately what is the remaining useful life of all the components, or, what kind of operation and maintenance needs to be done in order to keep them in a good working condition. The capacity analysis will tell us, hey, does this facility have what we need to support the growth that we want in the future? And then doing a comprehensive look at the water quality factors might answer the question that's been ongoing for a long time of, hey, if PFAS is an issue at well 8, is it finally time for us to look at iron treatment at well 7 and rely on well 7 a little more than you have in the past? When it comes to PFAS, we'll specifically evaluate, there's always a do nothing option, which in reality would look at, is there a different way that we could operate these wells to maybe not rely on well 8 as much, and like I said, perhaps take a look at running well 7 more. But there's also 3 different common treatment technologies available out there for PFAS, namely granular activated carbon removal, ion exchange removal, and reverse osmosis. What we would do based on projected regulatory limits is do a cost analysis and a footprint of, if you were going to do treatment at 8 or well 6, what exactly would that look like? How much would that cost? At the end of this, we would come out with, like I said, kind of this coordinated, comprehensive capital improvement plan. We would break it into 0 to 5-year projects, 5 to 10-year projects, and then long-term would be 10 to 20. And it might answer the question of, hey, is now the right time to invest a lot of money in keeping well 8 running, or do we just kind of do minimal work there and focus on well 7. That's just kind of the most likely yet hypothetical scenario, but this study will allow us to look at all those things so that when Jason's planning out his operation and maintenance, or you're in discussions with developers about how much supply or fire protection, et cetera, you can support for particular developments, you'll be able to answer those questions and know that you have a full understanding of what the water system needs are. That's it in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I had two questions. One, you mentioned the 3 possible treatment options for PFAS, and I know when we say PFAS, there's all sorts of different
Yep.
chemicals there. And I know some can't be treated there or extremely expensive if
Sure.
possible. Are the types that we've measured treatable with one of those 3?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I do not know the answer to that, but we would dive into that as part of this study. And if something is not treatable, that's obviously a big, factor and component as to, how we would steer the recommendations.
And then do we think we'll be done in time to roll the findings into our 2024 capital planning?
That's the hope. The timing's gonna be a little tight. We're gonna be starting that in what, April again? April, May, which,
I believe when we looked at the schedule, excuse me, department heads are getting capital budgets to us in May. I think it was
So-
like the very beginning of May.
I would certainly think we could probably have 24 stuff ready to go, yeah. It's the long-term stuff that obviously may not be ready yet. And I will tell you, that's one of the things about this that really intrigued me. And one thing Ben didn't touch on that we're gonna look at as well, and that's regulations. And we're gonna, get the 5 and the 10-year based, also based on regulations, things like tank cleaning and hydrant painting and, all those meter replacements, those sorts of things that are gonna be coming at us as well, that we previously hadn't been thinking about. So really looking for a good, 5+ year CIP out of this.
I got a question as far as these chemicals go that we're looking at, because I've read a lot of stuff in the paper, and I'm just asking the experts, I guess, is that these PFAS, are they more prevalent in a shallower well or a deep well, or both?
Good question, and they're more prevalent in the shallow wells. So the mode of contamination is through waste streams. Whether something, you could take the example of like JCI Tyco up in Marinette, where they're actually testing firefighter foam.
Where they were making it too.
Right. So it can just end up like on the ground and get into the streams, et cetera, and that, has a direct mode of entry into the shallow aquifer. Or if it's in an industrial manufacturing process, it'll eventually end up at wastewater treatment plants, which also discharge to surface water. But deep aquifer wells so far are not nearly as susceptible to PFAS as the shallow aquifer wells.
The other thing I just wanted to touch on, in the memo here, it mentions we had planned on replacing the generator at well 8, and that is still operating. It's just, it's got some age to it, and my concern is part availability, replacement parts. And that is well 8, which is where we did get the detect of the PFAS. So at this point, I really don't feel there's any point in putting money into that well until we really know where this is headed. If you also remember when I talked to you about PFAS, we talked about EPA setting some ultra-low limits, and that hasn't happened yet. So we still don't know the rules on that one, so we'll have to, monitor that, and that'll help decide, once we know those limits, then we can dive into that more.
Jason, other than that, or I should ask you, Ben, is there any pending legislation or anticipated legislation that might come into play with this as well?
Yeah, so the big controversy right now is the threshold set by EPA for a couple of key compounds of PFAS. You were right, there's like 200 different individual compounds that fall into generically PFAS, but 70 parts per trillion. What Wisconsin DNR had been looking at for a while is lowering that to 2 parts per trillion, which ironically is below the limits of detection. And it's kind of this theoretical limit that comes out of, toxicology and it, I could go on, but they basically say, okay, in order for this compound to bioaccumulate in your body to a point that it causes some type of noticeable symptom, they theoretically assume how much of your exposure is through drinking water and how long you would consume it, et cetera, and they back calculate 2 parts per trillion, which again is below the limit of detection. So for all effective purposes, we would be looking at, all right, what are the treatment options to get the key elements below the published requirements, 70 parts per trillion, for example, and then knowing that there's been some momentum of going toward 2 parts per trillion, what would the incremental increase in cost, which would be increased areas of filtration
Or a new well.
or volume of granular activated carbon or whatever, that would all increase a facility footprint or steer you toward a new well, et cetera.
That was going to be part of my question, Jason, as far as, I don't know what, the state in its infinite wisdom did the same thing with lead renovation laws. They assumed if your house was built before 1975, that you had lead paint regardless of what your tests showed. But the other question I would have in regards to cost for the water system itself that we're discussing now, is that what have we looked at, excuse me, in the next 5 years for our storage systems? Because I know our population has increased.
Well, and that's part of what this study is going to help us find out, is where we're at with our demands versus what we can supply.
What is it? You have to have, if in case of an outage, you have to have two days worth or a day and a half?
Yeah, your biggest well out of service.
So for another reason, I just read this today in our 81162. And it's, if you have one pumping unit going into your system, you need to have 1 average day's water use in storage. But if you have multiple, it relies on standard engineering practice. So what we run through to analyze that, and which we actually did for the village back in 2013, we'll take a look at all of your wells operating with the largest one out of service and say, okay, how much can these other facilities produce? How much, your peak demands take you how much higher above that, and that's what needs to come out of storage. The second parameter, of course, is talking with the fire department to see what their target fire event duration and flow rate is to make sure you have adequate storage. What I can tell you from what I know from having done it in 2013 is you're in a pretty strong position. Remember Mike Miller actually having a light bulb idea go on of, you could, at that time, you could almost run the system by taking the elevated tower out of service in the winter and just running the whole system off of the standpipe. I'm sure you've grown past that option now, but that's just kind of a little bit of background and how we'll approach that.
The other thing about it too is, if you remember, in 2020, I think we updated the water model. Was that 2020?
Yep, correct.
And so that's a tool in this study that's utilized. We updated it with all the water mains we replaced, everything downtown, and any street projects, so.
I will make a motion to approve the proposal from Strand and Associates for the water system master plan.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
All right, moving on to consider Mill Pond Pier Replacement Bid Award.
So we did have a bit of an issue with the bid opening on this project. We received 2 bids, and bid A, the apparent low bidder, failed to write their bid amount in the bid documents, so we didn't know how much their bid was upon opening it. So what we did is, we did not open bid B at the time. I reached out to Chris and Tim for some advice. And what we did is, before we opened bid B, we did get bid A. got that number, and then we opened the second bid. So apparent low bidder was bid A. Actually, it's Complete Piers. Ryan Eagleson is here tonight. And Chris has got a couple things he wants to talk about with the bid. I did go through bids, and the bids definitely meet the proposal requirements, the requests, so we're in good shape that way.
Yeah, so a couple of things. With respect to the irregularity of the fact that the number wasn't in the bid, obviously that's not ideal, but the case law makes clear a couple of things as far as public bidding goes. One is that the purpose of the public bidding law is to protect the public, to make sure the public's getting the best price for the deal. And the second thing is to make sure that it's a fair process for the contractors involved. So in this case, and then once you've met those two standards, then the boards have discretion to make a decision based on the circumstance that makes sense. As far as the fairness goes, I'm comfortable that the process we put in place to make sure that the second bid hadn't been opened until the first bid was fixed should address that concern. So I'm okay with that.
And it's been documented.
Yeah, we documented that. We've got, it's marked, that there's no question about that. The other question that's a little bit different with this one is it actually includes a donation, a $5,000 donation that gets it down to the $53,950 number. It's not a common thing, certainly, to see a donation in a publicly bid project, but given the circumstances with this one, with the fact the number was left out originally and then we had to hold it until after the fact, I just thought it was important to kind of give the board the option of whether you want to accept the donation at this time, which effectively results in the lower number, or if you want to say, we don't want to give the impression that we allowed the bid to come in late because there was a donation thrown in. So we'll award it the higher number, and then if they want to donate it on the back end of their final pay request, that's fine too. So we wrote up contracts with both options in there, and then the board can figure out what makes the most sense.
So you're making this suggestion because of the way it looks, not because
Largely
of the donation
cosmetic,
itself.
yeah. But for the circumstances, I wouldn't have been too concerned about it, but since we had to kind of make up the process a little bit as we went because of the absence of the number, I didn't want anybody to, I mean, either way, they were the low bid, frankly, even without the donation. So there's no issue there, but I don't want, for example, the other contractor to come in and say, well, maybe you strong-armed the bidder to make them throw in a donation, or else you weren't going to accept their bid at all. There's no reason, factually, that's not correct, but I didn't want anybody to be able to make that allegation.
And you said that we documented?
We did,
The
yeah, we
process?
actually have an affidavit saying we didn't open that second one until the first one was corrected.
Okay.
I also want to try and act in a responsible manner for the people of the community. If there's someone willing to donate $5,000 toward this, I think it'd be foolish for us not to say no.
I think because you got it documented, I think you're fine, especially with an affidavit. I'll make a motion to award the bid for the Mill Pond pier replacement to Complete Pier Service for $53.90.
And I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Consider LED light, street light update project for 2023. Any questions?
Are most of these on Church Street?
The page there, the second page is a list of all the locations. We Energies picks these sites and they try to group them in a similar area so that it's most efficient for their crews. I really don't have any say on
You're
what
talking
they
about
do.
this page, right?
Yes, I
Okay.
know that all the yellow ones, I believe, are the Buell Drive fiberglass poles. Like I say, they want to kind of stay in an area and focus on that.
Got
I
it.
would just ask in the future, can they just give us a map? It's kind of hard to be like, where are these?
Yeah, no kidding.
Sure.
That said, I will make a motion to approve Phase 2 of the LED streetlight upgrade project.
Yeah, I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Consider approval of proceeding with Veterans Memorial Project.
This is great,
It's incredible, actually.
really,
I
and
love
great
this.
that we've got the citizens and the businesses involved with it, so.
I like the proposed material. It's pretty sharp.
Yeah, Lori created a little memorial to the memorial over there.
Those are gonna look really nice.
Yeah, we obviously got a lot of buy-in on, you know, contributions and getting this thing done. And Benchmark has committed to having it completed by Memorial Day weekend, so, yeah.
And this helps you out quite a bit as well, right? In any kind of issues in that area, you can remove bricks one at a time instead of just chopping up concrete.
Yeah, I think this will work out real nice. Obviously, you know, we'll put this down and there won't be any bricks that are engraved. And then as we get them engraved, we'll remove one and replace it with, you know, so we'll essentially get an extra pallet so that we have to switch them out. And then this thing can grow as well. I assume that's gonna happen over time.
Now, these are more of a concrete brick, correct? They're not like a Chicago pink or,
There's a sample right there, yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if they'll be that easy to remove without breaking them, because they lock in, but. You got that. Oh, they got that, though. I got guys.
we got guys.
I got guys.
One right there.
I got guys. And, yeah, we're hoping to get that moving.
Do you need a motion?
Just really looking for the board support. Obviously, it's on village property, so just wanted to make sure, you know, we're all behind this.
Yeah, that's great. Yep.
Yeah, Jason Smalley was kind of the catalyst behind a lot of this. And, yeah, wish he was here for this one. All right, consider approval of state municipal maintenance agreement, SMMA.
This one, I had a little heartburn over with the state, but in the end, there's nothing we can do about it. Basically, they're saying we're on the hook, whether we sign this agreement or not, for the maintenance within village limits.
on Highway 20?
Yep.
I thought that was Walworth County.
So Walworth County, that's exactly was my answer to them, is I thought that was Walworth County. Walworth County is responsible for the driving lanes. They're responsible for doing the pavement markings in the driving lanes, plowing snow, potholes, those sorts of things. They're not responsible for curb and gutter. They're not responsible for any of the storm sewer infrastructure. They're not responsible for the grass, which obviously we address that through ordinance and sidewalk.
Now,
So-
is that still considered state property?
It is state right of way.
Okay, my question is then, what kind of remuneration do we get?
We get to be part of their upcoming project.
No, I guess because if we take care of certain things, we get paid by the state or county.
We do not, we never have. We've never been reimbursed. We've never had any sort of an agreement. This is gonna be the first actual agreement we've had with them. Previously, they didn't do this, and I operated under the exact same thought that you had. That's Walworth County's problem, not ours. And
Well-
apparently, that's not the case.
Well, I do know, though, Jace, of course, things probably have changed, but I know a long time ago, when the village was taking care of part of this stuff, that they did get paid back by county for certain things.
Okay, that's through county. I don't know anything about any
And
of
the
that.
state remunerates county.
Yep. So if we want to be part of the project, they need this signed document. I will say, really, all the infrastructure in this corridor that they're asking us to take care of is in really good shape. Now, obviously, there's noisy manholes, as Mary can attest to. Now, that's not in the section we're talking about here, but in the past, if I would've got that call about a noisy manhole, I would've said, call Walworth County. And interestingly enough, Walworth County's been out there and fixed these before, so I'm not sure they know what's going on, but in the future, the buck's gonna stop here.
So this says it's our responsibility, any pedestrian accommodations, including signage and pavement markings outside of the signalized intersection. And I know we've had fights with them about putting up signals and for the police operating one of those radar signs and things like that. Is this going to address any of those back and forths we've had?
So the crosswalks have always been our responsibility because those are wants from the village. The state doesn't want crosswalks. Now, the intersection, that's treated a little bit differently. We will be doing some snow removal in the intersection when there's now islands up there. But as far as the pavement markings in the intersection, that's on the state. the pavement markings at Edward Street and North Sterling, that's gonna be on the village. I don't know what you're talking about specifically with the police lights.
Well, I know, like, when Al was here, we used to put up that sign. And this is not in the area that we're doing construction, but up there near the well.
Yeah,
coming into the
flashing
village.
flashes.
And it would, tell you how fast you're going. It was on the 30-mile-an-hour one, and then I think they complained to us and said, you got to take it down. And then I know when we've talked about putting up the crossing lights, that they've balked at that. So, I mean, does this give us any wiggle room in terms of that?
I would suspect not, because if we wanted to add another crosswalk or pedestrian outside of what's been approved, we would need to go back for another approval for that. I can't speak to Jeremy's sign. I don't know exactly how that is handled.
I guess, I mean, this is probably outside of this. I mean, they're making us take down our sign and those trees. And I was driving through the other day, again, on the interstate, and it was like, I lost track of how many state signs. It's just like sign. It's like, how many signs do we need?
Yeah, so part of that, it's on me right now, and I'm dropping the ball at this point because it's been 2 weeks, and I want to put together a letter to the state identifying that we don't want to eliminate our welcome signage, that we need to have it part of our community. It's something that's in state right-of-ways for a number of different municipalities, and it doesn't make any sense that we wouldn't have it for ours. So I just need to put that letter together and get it to the state, essentially. Get Eileen's
Muskego has
approval on
one.
it first, and then we'll send it to the state.
Muskego has one right on Racine Avenue.
And it's not like these are in a high-speed zone either,
Did they ever get back to us about the speed reduction in that area for signage?
No. The other thing I just wanted to point out is, hang on a second. Oh, okay, never mind. We talked about that already.
All right, I will make a motion, since we don't have a choice, to approve the state municipal maintenance agreement for the Highway 20 project.
I'll second that. What do you do?
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. All right, consider a recommendation of Planning Commission to approve telecommunication tower located at 2485, 2491 South 120th, RXUP 00230A, Village of East Troy applicant, application 2022-38. Any questions about this?
This is just coming back to us again because of, it was not done properly, I guess.
No, it's done just fine. There was a couple of neighboring homes that had some questions about that going up near their home. And then there was a change in the way it was presented by our village planner. And because of the way that it was changed and how we were supposed to do it the original way, there's really nothing that can be done. The state doesn't allow for us to deviate from their recommendations.
And when the board would have discussed this previously, it would have been more a question of whether we could proceed because it was on village property. Now it's actually going through the official plan commission approvals and the recommendations.
Okay, thank you. I will make a motion to approve the application for the telecommunication tower located at 2485/2491 State 120, RXUP 00230A.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to reports. Any questions about Booth Lake Memorial Park minutes from 11/16?
A lot of people have commented to me they've enjoyed the skating rink.
How about any questions about the phosphorus update? Any questions on the fourth quarter police department report? How many questions about the December financials? Any questions about the Park and Rec minutes from 9:12? Any questions from the Library Board minutes 12:13? Any questions about the Emergency Services minutes from 12:06? Hope there's not, because Jason's not here. And any questions for 40 on the Planning Commission minutes from 1:09? I'll make a motion to adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 1985 1E for the purpose of conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons required a closed session, TID development. Roll call?
President Seeger.
Yes.
Trustee Alexander.
Yep.
Yes.
Derek said-
Trustee Nugent. Yes. Trustee Johnson. Trustee Renucci.
Yes.
Trustee Wisniewski.
Yes.
Thank you.